Welcome to the Shared Practices podcast. I have with me my good partner and friend, Dr. Alex Sharp, the man who is a giant among men. And we're going to talk about some fun stuff today. Alex, how's it going?
Going great, Richard. What an intro. I'm standing on my bread box to try to live up to that. But what's funny is before we hit record, we have a topic and we have some ideas and we have some bullet points around the topic. But I just think it's funny how over time we were able to come up with a great topic and not put in like hours and hours and hours of prep. We can just volley some ideas back and forth and then we rough out the bullet points and then we go. So I think that's a sign of you being a consummate professional.
No, it's a sign of like we've lived some crap. It's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
This is no longer theoretical. It's not like, hey, let's get some experts on the podcast who've done some things so that we can pepper them with questions. It's like, no, we've been here, done this, got the shirt, and there's still more to learn. But that ability to talk about what's worked and what hasn't worked, we can do it in our sleep.
I was talking to a representative from one of the new dental schools that's opening up, and they were asking a bit about my bona fides, and I was explaining exactly what you just said. That I became a part of this amazing podcast that started out with the mission of learning from the experts in the field, and then somewhere along the way, I don't know when the torch got passed or the baton got handed off, but yeah, we gained enough actual tangible experience ourselves to have a platform to stand on and say, hey, we've done this, do this instead of this. Here's a hard won lesson, avoid this landmine. And that's what I enjoy doing, is saying, all right, well, I stepped on this landmine. Here's how not to do that. And here's what I learned as a result. So yeah, it's cool to be on this side of it now.
Well, and I'm going to tease some behind the scenes numbers that I don't know if I'm allowed to share, but we can edit this out if you don't like it. Um, we get a profit and loss statement on a bunch of practices that we get to see how well they do. And something I'm sure that's actually a little bit painful for Alex, or a source of pride, maybe both, is the fact that your very stable, formerly sharp family dentistry practice is this anchor of stable profitability, a good office, good people, a solid culture, and it outperforms a lot of denture and implant offices that have very high production dollar amounts. Scott Luna talks about these different paths to $1 million profitable practice, and we've got our growth avatars. There's a lot that's possible in one large, healthy practice. And your practice has been an anchor for Shared Practices Group, but also for your team, for your patients. And I think a large part of that, and you and Lana and anyone else who's been involved would probably agree, has been the concrete culture that you've built that is no longer ephemeral. It's no longer this transitory, depending on which dental assistant shows up for work today, that's what our culture is. And if someone moves on or quits or leaves, and so I see a true dollar amount payoff in getting culture right in a dental practice and making this go from ooey gooey intangible to something that can be implemented, that can be understood, can be systematized and digested, but also comes from heart and soul. It's not just like some shell of a robot of culture. It's like, no, this is who we are and what we do. And even since then, you have further learned more things of like how to make culture concrete. So, did I share too much there?
No, I think that's fair to say, because when we're talking about GP practices, I actually had this conversation with a prospective SPG doc the other day, and he has been in the GP world, he's been in the surgery world, he's got a uniquely well-rounded skill set when seeking to join SPG. And we were talking about the differences inherent to the GP model, particularly the model where it's multiple providers, multiple doctors, and in our parlance at SPG, the profitable group, where it's two docs, 4 to 5 hygienists, 4 to 5 dental assistants, 4 to 5 front office team members, office manager. And what you find is that there's very tight variance in the GP world, where month over month it's going to be a pretty tight window where the amplitude of the highs and lows is just really confined, for better or for worse. I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying that's the nature of the beast, because you have recurring hygiene revenue. You have very consistent diagnosis per new patient on average. There might be some variability if some big cases come in, but if you have a well-defined scope of services, then each month, each quarter is going to look pretty similar, some seasonality between quarters. Denture and implant model, it's a horse of a different color. You have higher highs, lower lows. And it's also the same from a doctor's experience perspective, where you have the sunniest of sunny days, you have the rainiest of rainy days clinically, and you have to understand about like what do you want to live out as a provider in each of those models. And I think that when we're talking about culture, yeah, there's going to be a different cultural imprint on each of those models that really is derived from, yeah, a shared set of beliefs, but really it's a shared set of actions, shared set of behaviors. And yeah, you derive those behaviors from those beliefs, but you can have the poster on the wall, you can hand out awards, but ultimately at the end of the day, how do people behave under duress? Because it's not necessarily a case of under in the best times on the best days, how do we behave and how do we act and how do we conduct ourselves. It's when things are going to HE double hockey sticks in a handbasket that we realize that, okay, we need some understanding of when a patient shows up late, or a patient's yelling at us on the phone, or a team member doesn't behave in keeping with what our expectations are. What do we do about it, or what do we not do about it? What do we accept as being suboptimal, and do we turn the other way? All of those are elements of the culture, and I think that one thing that George has taught me over the years is you want the culture, yes, to be about the people, but you also want to have a sense of being able to make the cultural expectation and execution be larger than one person. So that if one person can be the standard bearer initially, but then you have to find a way to scale that. You have to find a way to define what it is about that person's set of beliefs or opinions or deliverables that you can then train on. And I heard a great thing the other day. I can't remember if it might have been on Jack Altman's new podcast. I think he's on like six or seven episodes in. But the notion was missionaries versus mercenaries. And so when you're starting a company or a practice, or you're buying a practice, you're starting out, you want people that believe. You want missionaries. You want people that can extol the virtues that you or your philosophy brings to the table. And then over time, there's going to be some transition point where you start to attract more mercenaries. Mercenaries are the types of people that want to be paid well for what they do. They're highly skilled, they're very capable, and they're not the type of folks that will take a flyer on someone who's unproven early on. But once you have something to stand on, once there's a foundation, once there's proof of concept, then you can attract those people to be extremely high performers. And I've seen that played out, not really understanding the nuance until, looking back in the rearview mirror, but I see that played out almost to a T with a lot of my experiences, where you attract people that believe, and then they grow and they're able to do even better over time. But then you find people that come in and say, hey, I think I can get mine by working there and still coexist and level up what I bring to the table because of the cultural lessons that I can derive from that place, that practice, that company. And so I think that that's an interesting thing to think about, is if you're a dentist out there, you're starting a practice, you're buying a practice, understand that you want to plant that flag within the first 3 to 6 months and find people that believe in what is different about you. Because when you're in dentistry specifically, it's all too easy to try to measure up and be on the same level as everyone else. But really, a patient chooses you, or a team member chooses you, not because of what you do similarly to everyone else. It's what do you do different? What is the differentiating quality that makes someone choose you, or makes someone want to work with you for the long haul? And I promise you, it's not because of what's similar, it's because of what's different. And that's the cultural piece.
Well, it's so funny. My evangelical proselytizing background is like, well, you just got to convert the mercenaries. You got to get them in the door, give them a
And you
little
can do that. You
taste.
can do
They're
it.
and they're like, what is this? This is different. What's this magic? I want some. But I mean, at the end of the day, I see, maybe this is a oversimplification of culture, but it's like, do people want to be here?
Mhm.
Um,
That's not oversimplified, Richard. That's the reality. Like that's what at the end of the day, people vote with their feet. And if they dread going to work every day, then your culture stinks.
and patients feel it. They're like, these people want to be here. These people like each other. At least they act like they're interested in each other and they want to help each other out. They're interested in me. And can we recreate that without it just being this like special lining up of the stars and we just have a team that likes each other? Can we instead create reasons for people to like their job? Can we create a game for them to play every single day that they can win at and feel really good about? Can we create a set of rules and expectations that they can get behind and hold other people accountable to? And I think if you can do those two things, most people show up for work. They don't know the game they're playing. They're just covering down. They're running all over the place. They don't know their exact roles and responsibilities, where their job description stops and someone else's starts. And so they're playing a game that they're like, I just hope I don't get fired, and I hope I don't attract the wrong kind of attention. Um, because like I don't know, I survive another day, and then they don't know how to, the expectations for them and for everyone around them, and they're not bought in. They haven't been evangelized. They haven't turned into missionaries for the core values, for the set of expectations around behaviors and the things that are rewarded, the things that we recognize, and show people this is what we're all about. And you talked about attracting your tribe. It's also about repelling the people that aren't a good fit. It's like, can we piss off the people that don't want to live in a workspace where we hold people accountable and have crucial conversations, um, which is
I
which
think
is
we've
easy.
gotten good at that over the years, Richard. Like being repellent to the wrong types. That's just as important as attracting the right ones.
Yeah, yeah, and so let's get more concrete. Let's talk about a daily winnable game. This is something I'm really bought in on my personal life in Next Level Fathers, the men's group I'm running on the side here. It's like, let's have something we can win no matter what, with clearly defined rules, with clearly defined scope, and have momentum to it. Have these inputs that we can succeed at. So, what does that look like for a dental practice? How do we build a winnable game for our team members?
I love the gamification of it because it speaks to everyone's intrinsic desire. I don't want to say everyone, but most people that want to contribute to something larger than themselves, want some measurable of success. It seems basic. And I read a really good anecdote earlier on X.com that was talking about founder mode versus like standard approaches to work and what distinguishes founder mode from coming in, collecting a paycheck and going home. And the distinctions are too many to list. But what you have to do is translate, because for those of us that buy practices, start practices, we don't have an off switch per se. We're playing the infinite game. We're playing a different game than what most people are playing that need scoreboards. But the vast majority of the population, not saying this is right or wrong, need scoreboards and benefit from scoreboards. I mean, we all do. Founders do too. But especially on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis, it's good to have scoreboards. And so I think coming up with something that is measurable by position, because you mentioned that in the free for all of the day, it's really easy for something to be everyone's responsibility, ergo, it's no one's responsibility. And it's so straightforward for that to happen in a larger practice where you have a whole glut of people up front that are just all simultaneously doing lots of different things, and then wires get crossed because I thought so and so was doing that. Oh, in reality, nobody was doing that. So I think it's good to define what is each person's number. That's something that Peter Thiel did at PayPal 25 years ago. Was every single person on the team had some number that that they were responsible for, that they were held accountable for, and that if that number slipped, that they were reprimanded for, and that some majority percentage of their time and actions were dedicated towards bolstering the performance of that number. Um, in the dental office, it's not always as easy to do it by person. Sometimes you can do it by department as a proxy. For example, in hygiene, it's really easy to measure stuff, right? So, Tommy, our hygiene coach extraordinaire, and I went to a local hygiene school last week, and we dropped a lot of knowledge on the graduating class, and hopefully opened their eyes to what was possible for themselves in their career. And what we were talking about was some of those measurables, some of the ways that you can measure success. Obviously, there's what you can do with your own two hands in a hygiene chair or in a dental chair. You can also measure based upon how effective you are at communicating. You can look at your treatment acceptance rate. You could look at the number of people that say yes to something through patient acceptance. It's really easy to measure stuff in hygiene, but what you don't want to do is measure the wrong things, because I fell into this trap back in the day where I measured things that you were quote unquote supposed to measure in hygiene, but it's easy to lose sight of the big picture for uh, the whole angulation of the practice by focusing on something that's just easy to measure in a given department. So be sure to tailor those measurements in a way that is actually beneficial to the overall arc of the practice and its evolution. So easy things to measure would be uh, how long does a patient have to wait before they can get in for a new patient exam? Like that's the type of thing that the whole entire front office can rally around, because if that is right, if that is situated where it should be, then the whole practice thrives. Everything downstream of that is able to perform because of that one key thing. And that's something that I feel like a lot of dentists don't spend enough time noodling over, because they just think, okay, this is an easy measurable. This is something that shows that someone's doing the right things more or less each day. But I love working with a coach for that reason, because you get a different vantage point when you're working with a coach. Like Lori, one of our shared practices coaches, still coaches my GP office. And so she has a different way of looking at the numbers, the performance, because she's zoomed out, because she sees a way to compare apples to apples between things that feel unique in one location, but in fact, it's just a variation on a common theme that you see across practices. And when you're in your own four walls, it's not always the easiest to look at things objectively and dispassionately. And so that's where I think having someone with that frame of reference is really excellent to make sure that you're structuring those deliverables correctly by position.
Yeah, and that like deliverable of like what is the goal, what is the
Mhm.
score, what game are we playing, it then can also be, you can look backwards and say what are the inputs. And so I think about when I show up for work, do I know what I need to do first? What's the priority first thing? It needs to be done by a certain time. Do I know what I need to do when there's downtime, in response to new things that come up? Do I know what I need to do at the end of the day? When stuff goes wrong, how do I troubleshoot it? When we're covering down for people, what are my responsibilities? How am I expected to help other people? Those are all things that are so concrete on the inputs, that if we can clarify those, and so often we don't. I mean, I'm thinking about right now, I have a virtual assistant in the Philippines, Nicole. She's amazing. She's got a daily and weekly task list, but I'm not looking at those things and holding her accountable. I need to do more. And I'm like, okay, crap, I'm the bottleneck. I got to make sure I've got enough work for her, on a daily basis. But I should be looking back and auditing, and making sure that we're living the agreements we've already made. Um, because those are the inputs when it comes down to it. It's like, what do I do first? What do I do throughout the day? What do I do when things go wrong? How do I cover down for people? What do I do at the end of the day? And then weekly and monthly. And so, the dirty word that we don't want to say is checklists.
Yeah.
But that's how we play the game.
I think the checklists are good. I think the checklists are great early on. I I I personally, and this might be the wrong way to look at it, but I personally don't love checklists ad infinitum. I feel like you do it initially to develop those habits. For example, my virtual assistant that I work with, there was a period of time where we were tracking allocation of time into different buckets, probably for 3 months. And then once I felt like everything clicked, light bulb went off, okay, we're sort of going, then I go back and modify if the output is wrong. So, and I think that that can be a lesson in the dental office as you're training these habits. You track the habits, you track the inputs, and then once you feel pretty confident that the inputs are there and you're getting the results that you want from those inputs, then you can really just track the dashboards, the KPIs, the outputs, and then you can interpolate, okay, if there's something going on with the outputs, then I can go back and reverse course and retrain on the inputs. But I think, to your point, I think the context switching, the checking back behind people, that can wear you out, and that can be that could be really diminishing your ability to focus on bigger picture stuff if you're checking back behind people. So I think checklist for a period and then just modify based on if there's a variation in the output that you're wanting.
I like that. I like that as an evolution of it's the same things. They know what is expected of them at every point in the day. Um, so I think the next part of this is jumping into what we've talked about before around core values. So it's like I know what the expectations of me are. What are my expectations in relation to other people? And how do we make that concrete instead of just the cat poster, the hang in there poster on the wall? Um, and you've done such a good job of this. Like your office is my favorite example of this. That just has very concrete, straightforward ways of implementing this on daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis. So give us your current perspective because maybe it's evolved over.
I mean, it's the reality, the actual brass tacks reality is that it's so hard to do it to the letter the right way. And what I would say is the right way when you're in one practice and you're able to focus and really systematically go about this is to do your quarterly performance reviews, even if you don't call it a performance review, your quarterly check-ins, your quarterly temperature gauge of all your team members, where you rate them based upon how they perform in each of those core values. And it's, yes, it's subjective, but ultimately what you're doing is you're creating some type of a scaffolding off of which to climb up and have conversations that need to be had. Like if there's any type of a performance gap, then you can relate it back to the lack of embodying a given core value. Because that's really what the essence of the core values to me comes down to is giving you vocabulary to have those challenging conversations. It's a different way of attacking the crucial conversation necessity because you could think of it through the lens of crucial conversations as it's taught and as it's written, or you can think of it through the lens of traction EOS, which I think gets to the same outcome but with a slightly different path to get there. And that's why I like for the burgeoning leader in training is to go the EOS route and then to just rate people on core values at a given interval, even if it's annually at first. It just gets them thinking about, like, I'm going to rate myself, the owner of the practice, the OM is going to rate me. We're going to talk about any discrepancies. And it's in that messy middle between, hey, I gave you a plus, minus, you gave yourself a plus. Why didn't I give you a plus? It's that gap, and here's why, and here's what you can do to level up to get to the higher level. And it's just taking time to do that. It's carving time out of the schedule. It's placing import around it, which not everyone does. Maybe not everyone should, but I feel like if you want something lasting that's going to be self-perpetuating or as self-perpetuating as a culture can be, you have to instill some daily, monthly habits like that. And the daily stuff is just shouting people out in huddle every day for core values and repeating yourself and using that vocabulary. It's you just can't put them on the wall and forget about them. You have to think about how are you going to weave those into your ways of recognizing performance. And David Ogilvy was an advertising executive back in the 1960s. And one thing that he did really well in his books was he talked about how he just was nauseatingly repetitive with the truisms that he would spout off to his team and to his clients so that they knew that this was his vocabulary and they learned by almost attrition to speak in those terms and to use those phrases. And so, yeah, you just have to be back to the missionary thing. You have to be a missionary of your own ideology.
Well, and you talked about doing this the ideal way when you're in the office. When the pastor or the prophet is there in the office, the fire is going to be going strong. As long as you've created that, doctrine and reinforced it and teach it and recognize it and reward it. I love your guys' quarterly awards that you hand out to people and recognize people, and that, or I don't know if you do it once a year. I can't remember what it was, but that like positive recognition in addition to the evaluations, as well as the buy-in of like helping people see this. This is where I'm less good of a rah motivational leader. Um, I'm not David Goggins. I'm not. I don't know if he's a great positive example of.
You could call that rah rah, I guess.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like at times I'm not as inspiring as I would like to be. Um, and so I think instead you can inspire through storytelling, through examples, through quotes, through other sources of inspiration, and continually reinforce those things. And then I do think that last piece that you talked about of EOS versus crucial conversations, the five dysfunctions of a team, so it's like, what is my daily job? How do we relate to each other? What are our core values? When we started interviewing doctors before they were hired and going over the core values before a doctor entered our organization, that was a huge shift in sussing out who is going to be a good fit. So who are we? How do we relate to other people? And then what happens when crap hits the fan? Is the last kind of major piece of culture that I see of how do we handle conflict? How do we fight? How do we bounce back and rebound? And those in my mind, more than like how do we gel? How do we like hang out together? What's the vibe in the office? Like those things lead to a baseline of order and like peace and calm, and like trust that like stuff is going to be okay even if it's not perfect, versus anxiety and fear and stress and survival instinct. So I do think that last piece of EOS, crucial conversations, five dysfunctions of a team, how we fight is how we correct, how we bounce back from failure, is where the rubber meets the road of like, what do we actually believe? And as the boss, this falls like squarely on our shoulders in the dental practice to model the behavior that we want other people to model.
Yeah, and another way of phrasing that to pull everything together is how do we solve problems? Do we sprint to the problem or do we try to brush it under the rug and hope it goes away? And that's especially nefarious with personnel problems because some of the biggest mistakes I've ever made around personnel stem from understanding, or I guess I could say misunderstanding the contributions that the person makes relative to what they take away. And one of my favorite analogies is the Bill Simmons sports guy dinner table analogy, where you have a person on a team, you say you're at a potluck, and they bring something to the table, but they take more off of the table than they put on. So it's a net negative on their contribution to the overall whole. And so what I've made the mistake of doing in the past, especially at the practice level, is overestimating their contributions and underestimating what they take away. So for example, say they're the best chairside assistant known to mankind, like the simply the best, like mind reader, they can keep a clean field, patients love them, but then they're a cultural cancer to your practice where, and if we put it more tangibly, say they're the drama person, the complaining person, the nothing's ever good enough person, like just basically the antithetical cheerleader, but they're really good to patients and they can sell treatment and they make your life easy chairside. What do you do? I mean, that's real stuff in a dental office. And I'm guilty of allowing that type of behavior to persist longer than I should have until it reached a breaking point and I simply couldn't delay it anymore. And I realized after the fact that I was not doing my part to embody the culture that I wanted to create at the practice, because if you look at the actual metrics and KPIs, hunky dory great, because I'm confident, I'm executing care on time, things are going really well clinically, but then in the background, behind the curtain, there's stuff that you have to work through, and then there's murmurs and favoritism and like, okay, why is it okay for this person to be able to complain about stuff or cause issues? And so you have to just train yourself to sprint toward the problem. And in hindsight, the best way to have handled that would have been to say, hey, I'm hearing these concerns. The scuttlebutt is that da 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 da. What's your perspective on this? And like, just bring it out in the open in a one-on-one environment, and then just see what comes of it. Like, have the conversation rather than saying, hey, I'm risking my production. I'm risking the smoothness of my day to day. And it takes courage. There was a quote that I saw earlier today that someone who has double the courage and half the intellect is going to run circles around the person that has double the intellect and half the courage. That's a truer statement than some of us wish it were, but it's the reality. So the more courageously you can dive into stuff, and obviously there's going to be times when you overcompensate, you put your foot in your mouth, but it's like Elon Musk's notion of when he's refining a workflow at Tesla, for example, and he's cutting it down to the studs. If he's not cutting a little too much off of the workflow, he's not cutting enough. Like, you should overcorrect sometimes when you're trying to get down to first principles. And so that's kind of the notion there, is that you have to commit to being courageous, knowing that there's going to be some false positives there that you have to correct for later on.
Yeah, and this is the making sure everyone kind of sees how serious you are about this, and this is real. This is not just we're like making reference to these things, but we're not actually acting on them. And over time, you combine all these things together and you train on them and you build leaders who also do the same thing. And that's when you've got a culture that is self-sustaining, that is bigger than just you, that's transferable over time, despite not micromanagement of it. I think a certain team size, when there's five of you, and someone quits or two people quit, 40% of your culture is starting over, and that's just the reality of small teams. But when you've got a bigger team, when you've got multiple doctors, when you've got team leads and an office manager, even if you've got a smaller office, but you have an office manager or you have people really bought in on this, it can survive the departure of good people and come out better on the other side. And that's the goal. Like, that's what I really want for dental practices, is to have that stability, no matter who's there and who's not there over time. And hopefully today we've given people some concrete action.
The one thing I would add to that, Richard, is that turnover, my definition and understanding of turnover has evolved so much over the past few years, to the point where I understand that the culture persists in spite of any personnel changes. The Everything is okay. If someone leaves, if the person that you feel like is just indispensable to the practice leaves, it's gonna be okay. It might be rocky for a minute. You might have to duct tape some stuff together for a period of time, but eventually it's gonna work out. And that's whether it's an associate doctor, a hygienist, front office person, office manager, dental assistant. It doesn't matter. You're going to find the right people. And so I think living in fear is a lesson that I would like, avoiding living in fear around personnel departures. It's easy to say, hard to do, because you can always point to, my market is crappy. It's hard to hire people. There's just a dearth of fill in the blank role, but you're going to attract more people. There's always ways to get creative and to hire other people. There's always ways to get your name out there and to offer sign-on bonuses if you have to. You just can't. Life is too short, and your career is too short to live with people that bring you down and that don't allow your practice to reach its potential. So don't look at turnover with trepidation and fear, because you will land on your feet, even if there's a rocky period that you have to get through first.
Well, and anyone who lists those factors, like there's 9 out of 10 other dental offices have the same difficult factors when it comes to turnover. And the difference is, how do you respond to that? How do you make it through? How do you hire through that? How do you not accept that, oh, it's just impossible to find anyone, and you make it happen? So that would be the other thing, is like, don't think you're a unicorn, that you're a butterfly and that only you have these problems. It's like, no,
We're
we all have these problems,
we're all
and
unique snowflakes, Richard.
we are. I'm melting over here. So, Alex, this has been great. I really have enjoyed this conversation, and hopefully, people can take just a few action items of, like, or a lot. You know, they're not doing any of this, back to their practices right away, and just do something. Do something tomorrow. Even if it's just share this conversation, have this conversation with someone else in the office, get some feedback. Like, do you feel like there's order, that you know what to do every day when you show up? Do you know how what we believe in, and how we recognize people? Do you know what happens when we fight? There's ways to immediately act upon this information, and usually opening your mouth so it's not stuck in your head is one of the chief.
And it's really cool if you have very little of this ironed out or nailed down, or very few expectations set in around any of these things. A blank canvas is a great thing. You got to look at it glass half full, because if you've never even trod into these waters before, then great. Let's have an initial conversation. Just go be curious with your team and help them or allow them to co-create what you want the outcome to look like. Find the missionaries that are already in your midst and use them to amplify the message so that everyone can be on the same page.
And if you want help baptizing people, just reach out to a shared practices coach, and they'll help dunk your team members. So I don't think we're allowed to say that.
I'm not touching that one.
You just need some help. You just need some help getting other people to see your vision, and our coaches can get you there. So, Alex, thank you so much for coming on. This was a blast, and hopefully we helped.
Thanks, Richard.
We'll talk to you next time on the Shared Practices podcast.